Good morning, and welcome to today's broadcast of Technomic Talks. Our topic this morning is sustainability, food service operator activities and attitudes. Before we begin, I'd like to extend two quick thank yous. First of all, I'd like to extend a thank you to our friends at IFTA for their collaboration with Technomic on the Technomic Talk series. And secondly, I'd like to thank those of you who've listened in on either one or both of the first two Technomic Talk webinars. The series itself is proving to be very popular, and attendance for Technomic Talks thus far has been terrific. So it certainly tells us that this type of discussion of hot topics is of really high interest and is valued by the industry, and it does encourage us to continue the program in the long term. My name is Wade Hanson. I'll be leading us through today's discussion. Please note my email address on the screen. I will show it again at the end, but we have been receiving great post-webinar questions the last few weeks, and if you want any additional information, please reach out after today's session. Today we consider this to be a continuation of our discussion from March 18th. For those of you who attended, Joe Pollack, Senior Vice President of Technomic, presented a sustainability discussion that focused on the consumer expectations. If you weren't able to listen to Joe's webinar, it is available on technomic.com, where you can have the opportunity to watch and listen to that presentation. But that discussion that Joe led really focused on the consumer, their awareness of sustainability, the importance they attached to sustainability, and what they expected of operators. So we're going to continue that discussion today with more of a look at the operator themselves. We're going to review current operator attitudes and perceptions, and we're going to have a discussion of their ideas for sustainability in the future. One thing you'll note, there is data that we'll be sharing throughout the presentation, and wanted to point out that that did come from a recent survey conducted by Technomic. We had an opportunity to survey over 600 operators. Those included chain restaurants, independent restaurants, the school segments, lodging, healthcare, other, which includes things like bars and taverns and catering, for instance. About 60% of the operators who we surveyed were from restaurants themselves, both chains and independents. The remainder was split fairly evenly across the other segments. To begin our presentation this morning, I'd like to quickly recap the consumer interest in food service sustainability activities as discussed by Joe. During that presentation, we discussed how Technomic has looked at over 30 activities over time that can reasonably be part of any sustainability definition. So we looked at things such as people. That covers everything from living wages to safe working environments. We examined the planet activities, everything from responding to climate change to water pollution and energy efficiency. We look at things around product or plate, from ingredient safety standpoints to the use of GMOs and many other topics. All of these are part of sustainability, and consumers look at all of these things differently. Those who listened to Joe recall that most consumers are pretty unclear of the exact definition of sustainability and tend to define it based on what is most important to them. Now, operators have proven to have a bit of a similar perspective. They consider sustainability to be a very broad topic with a different meaning essentially to all different operators. We do tend to see that leading national chains have the most formal definitions of sustainability, the most by-the-book definitions, if you will, of sustainability. In addition to the survey work we do quite a bit of qualitative work as well and have a chance to talk to the key decision makers with the different operators. I have two quotes here sitting in front of me from interviews that we've done. One leading limited service chain says, as a definition, sustainability is meeting the present needs without compromising future needs. A full-service restaurant chain says, for us, in our mission, sustainability means you're not taking more than can be replenished by nature and man. So it's a little bit more of a formal definition that's assigned by the chains. Most other operators define sustainability in terms of what makes sense for them, and they may only partially address this equation of people, planet, and plate. But regardless of whether operators see sustainability big picture or more narrowly, you can see with this slide and this pie chart that 93% consider sustainability to be important to their operation today. 50% saying very important, 43 indicating it's somewhat important. One thing to keep in mind as we go through this presentation is, like consumers, it is important for operators to both bring the greater good from a sustainability standpoint, and it requires that benefits be brought to them as well. So it's not 100% selfless when they're looking at this topic. Why are they engaged in sustainability efforts in the first place? Well, we asked the question of operators, do you believe your sustainability efforts are primarily driven by your internal commitment to sustainability, your customers' interest in food service operators being more proactive with sustainability, or your need to keep up with competitors in their sustainability efforts? We only allowed them one choice. So what did they most believe was driving these efforts? 59% indicate that their management and employees are behind the cause and adapting people, planet, plate as it makes sense internally. There is that internal commitment driving their programs. 29% suggest customers are demanding that they engage in sustainability, and they therefore want to be involved and they want to communicate their efforts to their customers. They feel that's critical. Only 12% think it's necessary from a competitive standpoint, that they can't be left behind in this aspect or they'll face a disadvantage. But that was when they were citing what was most important to why they're involved with sustainability. It actually gets a little bit fuzzier as we look a little deeper, because operators may believe there is truth to all of these statements. So we asked an agreement question. We asked a number, we gave operators a number of different statements, and we're just showing you a small sampling on this slide. But we asked them whether they agreed with these statements that we have on the screen. So let's first look at what we have as the first, second, and fourth statements. We incorporate sustainability practices because it's the right thing to do. We believe that sustainability is a key differentiator for our business, and we incorporate sustainability practices because we want to keep up with the competition. Those statements reflect some of the statements on the previous slide. And you can see they all get strong agreement and align for the reasons they're involved in it. If we look at the third and fifth statements, you also see some very interesting, very relevant agreement percentages here. My customers believe in sustainability but are not willing to pay more for it. That's a big number agree with that statement. And there is not a food service company that I believe is the best in class with regard to sustainability. 50%. You've got operators asking, where's the help? Who's leading the charge? They believe there's a void here. We'll come back to both this third statement and this fifth statement as we move through the presentation. We asked operators, have you made changes to your business model or practices in the past 2 years based on sustainability initiatives? 60% have made changes. 27% say they have not, and 12% say they're not sure. Typically, when somebody says they're not sure, it almost applies back to the definition. So they might look at it and say, well, we do some organic things on our menu. Is that sustainable? I'm not sure. Is green the same as sustainable? I'm not sure. So the small percentage had some difficulty answering that question, but 60% believe they've made changes. And how would they best describe those changes? Well, mostly to menu items and communication. Operators in particular want to communicate something to their customers right now. They want to communicate that they have a point of differentiation around the sustainability equation, or at a minimum, they don't want to be perceived as uninvolved, so they're looking to communicate somehow. One other aspect that they're making more note of is community involvement. It may not be new to them. They may have been engaged in community involvement for quite some time, but they might be putting a new positioning on it so that it is part of a sustainability or corporate social responsibility positioning. What are the primary benefits that the operators are seeing or attaining through their sustainability activities? Well, the top 5 that they identified for us was they're making a positive impact on the environment. It could potentially improve their reputation. They may have better food and beverage quality, has a positive impact on their customers' well-being, and a positive impact on their employees and their culture and their working conditions. These are all terrific things. One of the problems, though, is that these 5 do not necessarily align with what the operator says is most important about sustainability to their business. When we ask about what's really important to your business when you're evaluating sustainability activities and deciding what to move forward on, operators typically talk about things like maintaining profitability, operational efficiency, energy efficiency, food waste reduction. Many of those are positives from a sustainability standpoint, but it goes back to the idea that, like the consumer, operators are looking to see a benefit in these sustainability activities. It also, in a way, sheds a different light on that internal commitment that we cited earlier as the reason for their sustainability efforts. That commitment is important, assuming it works from a business standpoint. The biggest obstacles for operators in terms of sustainability, number 1, cost, cost, cost. All the operators that we talk to continually cite this as an obstacle, as a barrier. They are continually looking at their costs of all items. And for them, depending on the program, they might say, well, it's difficult for us to add 25 or 50% to the cost of one of our center plate items because we're going with something that costs a little more because of the sustainability activities that the supplier is attaching to that. It's difficult for us to add costs for certain disposables. It's difficult for us to add certain costs to beverages. They'll go on down the line, and they'll look at cost as a very, very important component here. Remember, 60% of operators said they don't believe consumers will pay for it. So the operators are assuming that they will be absorbing any costs that they take through these sustainability initiatives. And that becomes very prohibitive for many. Another barrier, lack of financial resources. Most operators are citing very tight budgets. They're citing the fact that their funds are not available today. They've already allocated funds towards technology or towards supply chain, and they're not allocating the financial resources towards sustainability. A lack of time and personal resources. Now, what we see is that the national chains, some larger regional chains, FSMs, and certain C&U, college and university, have dedicated resources to sustainability. And they can plan, they can research, they can work with customers. Most do not have dedicated resources towards sustainability. It may fall under an operations functional area. It may fall into other areas. But when they don't have the dedicated time and personal resources towards this, it typically falls further down their list of priorities. They also cite product availability as an obstacle, few choices, and they aren't necessarily going to spend a lot of time researching what those choices are. And in some cases, they cite limited supplier selection as an obstacle. Do operators believe that the issue of sustainability is easily understood by their customers? Well, about a third, or 36%, say they believe their customers do understand the issues of sustainability. But half of operators are not so sure. So one of the things that they're looking for is supplier support in better understanding the consumer. Otherwise, it's difficult for them to invest without more information about what the customer actually believes and what consumers actually have in terms of expectations. We also asked what they think consumers perceive to be the benefits of sustainability and what things do they believe are important to the consumer. And they cite recycling and reuse, local farming, raising or growing, food waste reduction, local sourcing, supporting the local community. It's actually a pretty decent representation of the consumer interests. But again, it's not necessarily a close match to their interests. So one of the questions that they have for suppliers is how do we reconcile that? What can we do that's good for us, the operator, and that's good for the consumer, and that we get some credit for? 53% of operators believe that having an actionable strategy is necessary to remain competitive in the next 2 years, an actionable strategy around sustainability. Most will say there's too much uncertainty around the topic today and they know that they need a plan put in place. Many say they don't want to fall behind in this area because the resources required will make it very, very difficult to catch up. And many say that they need to look into it and have a more actionable strategy so that they can do better resource planning. Currently, only about a quarter of operators indicate that they reward suppliers for having sustainability-focused programs. A pretty significant percentage say that they're not sure if they're rewarding suppliers because they're not sure necessarily which of their suppliers are sustainability-focused. So that, again, there's uncertainty around this issue. 50% indicated to us that there's no clear leaders. They do reward those that they find sustainability-focused by increased purchases and increased loyalty to the products, as you might expect. We talked to operators about those 30-some evaluation criteria that we talked about at the beginning of this webinar. And when they're evaluating suppliers, which of those criteria, what do they study about the supplier, and which things factor into their decisions of which products to purchase? And so we hear things, the top three, we hear things like product safety, ensuring ingredient or product safety. That's something that's quite measurable. They can evaluate the supplier on that characteristic. Operational efficiency they cite as being something very important as a factor in their decision making, and that's something that they can develop an understanding of through the relationship that they have with a supplier, site visits, and so forth. The third characteristic that they cite in terms of their evaluation is humane and safe working conditions. They want to ensure that this is occurring within their suppliers, but like many aspects of sustainability, they'll say that it's difficult to measure. Some things that they don't give much weight to are charitable giving, climate change, selection of seafood from replenishing sources. Things like that tended to fall further down the list. But operators have indicated that they want to work with suppliers that have actionable sustainability ideas, that can help them with cost-effective measures, that can help them with communication support and best practices, that show a willingness to partner or a willingness to share sustainability resources, because quite frankly, many are not going to be doing their own homework and having their own data or insights to study and make decisions based on that. So they're looking to work with suppliers closely. They are stretched thin. They are admittedly not experts. So we want to reiterate that in the view of half of all operators, there's a void in the best-in-class sustainability position. Not only that, but many operators will say the outreach by suppliers is considered light in this area. They'll say we work with manufacturer reps, we work with brokers, we work with DSRs. They aren't emphasizing sustainability activities, and in some cases they might actually be downplaying or advising against sustainability. So there's a bit of mixed messages here, but they want to hear more from the suppliers about what's possible and what would be effective for them. Keep in mind again, most see having a sustainability strategy as critical within 2 years. They have few resources, many have no current plans. They're looking to get that support from suppliers today. Some final observations and takeaways. Select operators are prioritizing sustainability. Most are not, so most require information and guidance. There are concerns over the consumer response. Is there a willingness to pay on the part of the consumer if they engage in sustainability activities, the operator that is? If not, how do they address sustainability to keep it manageable from a cost standpoint? There's also concern over what we might call a greenwashing effect. Some operators have seen that others have overstated their efforts, and then they get some resistance or some pushback from consumers. So they want to make sure that they're engaging in these activities, but that they have the right communication. They want to highlight their efforts, but not position their company inaccurately so that ultimately the consumer turns against them in some ways. There's very much a desire for cost-effective sustainability solutions. It's paramount. We hear that in virtually all of our conversations with operators. It permeates most of our discussions about this topic. ROI questions are prevalent. How do we measure? What do we measure? What's the impact of any sustainability program that we put into place? What's the return? What tools can we use to measure? These are all questions that the operators have. And that supplier support and guidance is critical. The operator wants to be involved in sustainability. They view it as important, but they're uncertain as to how much they can commit and who they can get help from. I hope that was insightful for most of you on the call. I want to keep you alerted to the next upcoming webinars that we have as part of the Technomic Talks series. On April 15th, 2 weeks from today, Barry Friends, a senior principal at Technomic, will be talking about the impact of power distributors on the food service business today. On April 29th, Heidi Keithley and Sandeep Malhotra will be taking a look at the state of the street, a look at the evolving nature of independent restaurants. And on May 13th, we'll be looking at the battle for share, supermarket prepared foods versus restaurants. Our Executive Vice President, Bob Golden, will be leading us through that discussion. Again, please take note of my email address on the screen. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and hopefully I'll be able to help continue this discussion around an important topic. Once again, thank you for your time and your attention today. On behalf of the entire Technomic team, thank you for listening. Have a good day.